guys, welcome back to another video. We have an interesting article here from the times.co.uk. Microsoft makes its last stand in the $69 billion battle for Call of Duty. So as we know, this was announced last January. It's been a long time that this saga has been going on. Tons of information continuously comes out. And Phil Spencer talks about what happened right after they announced it. They say here, when Microsoft unveiled this $57 billion takeover, I guess that's in pounds, so $57 billion pounds, takeover of video game maker Activision Blizzard in January last year, the US tech giant's gaming boss Phil Spencer knew his first port of call. Spencer, who oversees Microsoft's Xbox brand, emailed Sony's chief executive Kenichiro Yoshida and set up a call between Yoshida, Spencer, and Microsoft's chief executive Satya Nadella. So the first thing Phil Spencer did, which is hilarious because he obviously thought that we got to tell them right away. We got to make sure that they know we aren't trying to take the games off of their platform, which obviously didn't work because they're going so hard against this deal. And he sets up this call between Yoshida, Phil Spencer, and Satya Nadella. And the aim was to give Yoshida assurances that we were not going to pull any content away from the PlayStation platform. He says here, first, Phil Spencer says, we had the conversation and it was very cordial. We have a good relationship, which clearly that relationship has definitely been hurt from everything that has been going on. It was friendly at that time, but it did not stop Sony at all from going out and doing everything that they could from blocking this deal. Continues here and says, ever since Spencer has been fighting a battle to convince regulators to approve a deal that would give Microsoft control of a suite of hugely popular game titles, Candy Crush Saga, Guitar Hero, Overwatch, and Crash Bandicoot, you would argue, or you could argue that they're arguing over Call of Duty only, essentially. It's over ABK, but everything that we've seen focuses on Call of Duty going into subscription, Call of Duty going into the cloud, all that type of stuff. They haven't talked about Candy Crush Saga. They haven't talked about games like Guitar Hero, Overwatch, or Crash Bandicoot, essentially at all. So it's about Call of Duty. But from Microsoft's perspective, probably the biggest thing is going to be games like Candy Crush, the mobile side of things, where they can expand out Game Pass, expand out the Xbox ecosystem to everybody's mobile phone, where these games are already installed on. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them. Now, as we know, this week is going to be a big week between Xbox and the CMA. And it says this month, the UK Competition and Market Authority, CMA, warned that the takeover could lead to higher prices and less choice for the UK gamers. The watchdog is arguably the biggest hurdle for Microsoft to leap, although it also faces challenges from the European Commission, which we saw everything that happened last week with the 10-year deals to Nintendo, 10-year deals to Nvidia, and we'll see how that goes down with the European Commission. People seemingly think it went well. A lot of analysts are now saying that they think this deal is going to go through, but we'll wait and see because we still have the protection of PlayStation. You have the My PlayStation guy there, although that's kind of just a joke. I don't actually think the My PlayStation guy is going to affect this deal, but you just never know what's going to happen with these regulatory bodies. And then they say, and the US Federal Trade Commission, who I think is probably just going to base it off of what happens at the CMA and the European Commission. But if they pass it, I'm assuming the FTC is going to do the same. They're not going to try to bring this all the way to the court when the other big bodies have passed it. The CMA is what everyone is saying is the biggest roadblock right now. So that's why this week's going to be very interesting. They say the CMA is in the middle of an in-depth investigation into the deal, and this month proposed remedies, including that Microsoft sell Call of Duty, which Brad Smith came out with the European Commission and said that doesn't make sense. So you shouldn't be expecting any divestitures from Xbox and from Microsoft. They're not going to sell off Call of Duty. If anything, they'll just scrap the deal if it doesn't go through, and they'll go ahead and they'll spend all of the money that they're saving from not buying this and money hiding games, making third-party exclusive deals, which I think is worse for gamers. Because at least with this deal, if it goes through, you're getting access to, Call of Duty is staying on all the platforms. It's going to Nintendo now, and you're getting access to games on Game Pass on multiple devices. So for me, that's just more of a net positive thing. And I think for a lot of people, that's a net positive thing. Continues here, it says such a move would be so unpalatable, it could sink the deal together. The CMA is expected to make final decisions in April. Spencer has his work cut out trying to earn their approval. And then this is a look at their deals. This is like far and away the biggest deal Microsoft has ever made, which is crazy to think about because you think about Xbox, you think about that division within Microsoft. People were saying it was going to be closed down going through the Xbox One generation when the console was failing. It's obviously not their biggest sector, but this is the biggest deal, which really shows us Nadella, they're all in. they're all in on Xbox to grow it as much as they can grow it. They see the future. They see how important it is for Microsoft as a company, which is why this deal is so big. It's just a huge turnaround from the Xbox One generation. Literally, people were saying that Xbox was going to close down. There was going to be no more Xbox. Which obviously isn't the case. They came back super strong with the Series X and S and Game Pass and all that type of stuff. And here we are now with Microsoft's biggest deal, $69 billion. One thing is baffling Spencer, who has worked at Microsoft for 35 years. Why are regulators protecting Sony's PlayStation? So that is baffling Phil Spencer, the dominant player in the global market share of 70% in consoles, with the rest controlled by Xbox. Perhaps unfairly, regulators such as the FTC see their other big rival, Nintendo, as in a separate lower quality category of gaming. And I made an entire video on this. Go check it out as to how this entire thing happened with them not considering Nintendo as competition, why they don't believe it's competition, the power of the console, the family-friendly games. This is a picture that has been painted by regulators and by Sony, not by Microsoft, when it comes to competing with Nintendo. So when we saw that poster of the 70-30% market share between Nintendo or between PlayStation and Xbox in Europe, and people were saying that they were misleading people with that, they absolutely were not. Or it wasn't even 70-30. With the 80-20 mistake, with the 80-20, they weren't misleading anybody, because this is the picture that has been painted by the regulators and by Sony, and they're just responding to that picture. Now, Phil Spencer says this: competition is us trying to get stronger. I don't have a great rationale for how better competition in consoles is somehow hurtful for consumers, because to me, having us, Sony and Nintendo, doing well in the console market, all of us with strengths and uniqueness and content and capabilities, gives consumers more choice. I'd hate to see consoles go to where phones are, where there are only two manufacturers. And right now, we have three good competitors. And this is an interesting quote, because the main argument from the CMA is that this deal will bring us to two manufacturers. We'll bring the gaming industry to two manufacturers, because I think this is going to foreclose PlayStation. But clearly, Phil Spencer, if that was his secret plan, he wouldn't say it. But he believes that this is going to create strength amongst three platforms. Where, I mean, right now, currently within the gaming market, I would argue that there is great strength amongst the three different platforms, and they all have unique strengths. Like obviously Game Pass and cloud gaming and subscription and value is Xbox's strengths. And then you have PlayStation, first party quality content. That's their strength. And then you have Nintendo, which I would say first party quality content too, because I love their first party stuff, but they just have differentiated themselves completely in terms of the markets that are attracted to Nintendo. I think they've broadened the market more so than PlayStation and Xbox. So they're all different. They all do great things. So what Phil Spencer is saying here, I think currently is occurring. And then if this deal goes through, it will force PlayStation specifically, I think, to really continue to have to add value to their platform, continue to have to add more quality stuff, and continue to compete. Now, Spencer has just arrived from Brussels, where the Microsoft's vice chairman and president, Brad Smith, met with regulators to make their arguments. For Spencer, the logic behind the acquisition was to strengthen Microsoft's hand in mobile gaming. There you go. He says it right there. That's the main thing. That's where they're lagging behind. It isn't about Call of Duty, but Candy Crush, about Call of Duty Mobile. So I guess technically it's about Call of Duty. It's about Diablo Immortal. It's about the catalog of mobile games that is going to come along with this acquisition, which will expand out the ecosystem. Because right now, Phil Spencer's already said they believe they've kind of reached a plateau of slow growth now on the amount of people on console specifically that are going to actually subscribe to Game Pass, but where they haven't reached at all is the mobile phone area, which is just essentially unlimited. Like there's just so many phones out there, and it's already in people's hands. And if they actually were to go out and create a Microsoft Xbox mobile store with a bunch of their own first party mobile games, and that got into a bunch of phones and people were downloading them, ran through their phone from there, I think that would be a huge thing for Xbox that would make them grow. And then he continues here and says, that's the strategic angle for us. There was nothing about Call of Duty on PlayStation or Call of Duty not on PlayStation. And I think at this point, if you think Microsoft's lying about Call of Duty, I don't know what to tell you. They've offered 10-year deals. They would probably even offer more if they had to, if they're like, you have to offer 15 to PlayStation, they probably would offer 15 to PlayStation to get this deal approved. They didn't have to do any of that. And there's a chance that maybe this deal would still go through. Who knows? But it's not about Call of Duty. That's clear. But these regulators do believe, because Call of Duty is so big. I mean, if we look at the CMA's conclusion to the entire thing, I'll pull it up here and read it because it really plays into how much the regulators truly believe that Call of Duty is the factor as to why they need to block this deal, because it will destroy competition. So there's a huge summary on Reset Era from IDAS where he goes over a lot of the things, stuff that we've talked about in previous videos pretty much, but this was a section here where they talk about Call of Duty and how they don't believe that you can even create competition for it. So his conclusion or his summary of this part says, developing an alternative to Call of Duty is not enough to respond against a foreclosure scenario, and it's unlikely to happen in the short, medium term. This is what the CMA says when it comes to Call of Duty. They say, second, we note that in our assessment of entry and expansion, the relevant question is not what rivals could do. They say, for example, if developing a rival game is sufficiently costly, it may be that it would be more profitable or less loss-making for a platform to accept that its competitive offerings have been weakened than to attempt to develop a new franchise. Essentially saying it's going to be too expensive to ever try and make a competitor to Call of Duty. So if this deal goes through, the PlayStation competing third parties will just say there's no point in us spending the money to try to compete with a game that's going to be really hard to compete with. There's way too much risk and we're not going to do it. We're just going to accept that Call of Duty is the king. They continue here and say, while some third-party publishers could hypothetically see the absence of Call of Duty from rival platforms as an opportunity, they may also see the absence of Call of Duty as an opportunity to enjoy greater sales without incurring any of the additional costs necessary to improve their product, particularly to the extent an important competitor like Call of Duty has been eliminated or degraded from the forward-closed platform. So they believe that third parties won't look at this as a new opportunity to compete. They believe that they may look at this as a way to be more lazy, a way to take their current product and degrade it and make more money off it, reduce the cost it takes to make it because they don't have to compete with Call of Duty anymore. Which honestly, that could happen, but I think that as a company, like gamers will notice that. Gamers, there's so much competition. Not every single third party is going to go do that. So if companies start doing that because Call of Duty isn't there, you're going to see, I think, a lot of games just fall off, and then somebody will come in and compete and make that game that is high quality, that can compete with Call of Duty, and everyone will gravitate towards that. People aren't just going to continue to play stuff if they're degrading it. We've seen this happen many times. Then they say, in relation to likelihood, the evidence above shows that it is unlikely that publishers would create a new game or expand an existing game that becomes sufficiently large and similar to Call of Duty to mitigate the impact of any significant lessening of competition. Always get that acronym confused, in console or cloud gaming services, given the evidence on their plans to expand and the significant barriers to entry and expansion. Additionally, for consoles in particular, to the extent that Microsoft is unwilling to support a rival first-person shooter to Call of Duty, publishers would have a lower user base from which to recoup costs of development. This would further decrease likelihood of entry of expansion. So again, they don't believe anyone is going to take that risk to try to create something to compete with Call of Duty. There's just too much cost involved and they won't be able to make up those costs. They finally say here, Call of Duty, we consider it to be very unlikely that a game on the same scale as Call of Duty would emerge in the near future, either on consoles or cloud gaming services. And then finally, the evidence shows that whilst it is likely that there will be new games that are developed, they are not likely to be on a similar scale as Call of Duty and sufficiently undifferentiated from Call of Duty, such that the reduction in the range of games available to consumers on console and or cloud gaming services is mitigated. So there you go. That's what the CMA thinks about the ability of people to be able to compete with Call of Duty if it is taken off of a platform. But we know it isn't going to be taken off of any platforms. In fact, it's going to be going to more platforms if this deal goes through. The article continues on here and says, but the threat to Sony was clear on the day the news broke, as its shares slumped 30% in Tokyo. Last year, Spencer claimed that Microsoft would keep offering Call of Duty to PlayStation, but Sony's Jim Ryan hit back by saying the offer was only 3 years after the existing deal expires. And as we know right now, it actually was 5 years that they had offered them first, and then they moved it up to 10 years. So this 3-year thing, I don't know where that's coming from, but people are essentially saying that Jim Ryan was, I think, lying about that. Not 100% sure, but it was 5 years from what we saw in previous videos and previous documents, and then 10 years is the current offer. In Brussels last week, Microsoft Smith said that he would be ready to sign a 10-year deal with Sony, keep selling the hit franchise on the console. While gaming is Sony's largest division by sales, Microsoft makes far more from other products such as Windows, Office products, servers, and cloud services. Of course, I mean, this is why this part here, they make way more money in the other parts of their business, but their biggest deal is going to be in the gaming sector if this does happen to go through. The way both make money from gaming has changed dramatically. Previously, revenue came from sales of the consoles, controllers, and other kit. That's always something that is back in the day. That's how they made all of their money, because you would sell the console at a loss, and then you would try to tack on more controllers, memory cards, all that type of stuff, the software, of course. And now that's completely changed in terms of what we're seeing with Game Pass and with Xbox Cloud Gaming. But in 2021, Sony's gaming division made 21% of its 16.9 billion pounds of sales from hardware, while 31% was from add-on content, including in-game purchases. For the year ended June 2022, Microsoft's gaming revenues were 13.5 billion. It is not Microsoft's first deal for games studio. It bought Minecraft creator Mojang in 2014 for 2.5 billion, which I mean right now is probably like a sweet deal. And in 2020 bought ZeniMax for 8.1 billion. For latter, it promised not to pull its games such as Fallout, The Elder Scrolls from PlayStation and other platforms. And this is what Phil Spencer says. He says here, "We've lived up to those commitments and we're totally willing to do that with PlayStation and Call of Duty." And they have. I mean, they haven't taken off legacy games from the other platforms. Yes, Starfield's not going to PlayStation. Yes, Elder Scrolls isn't going to PlayStation. If Activision develops a brand new game once they're a part of Microsoft Game Studios, it's probably not going to PlayStation, but that makes sense. That makes sense. It's a first party studio where if you're developing a brand new game, you're putting all your money and your resources into it, you're keeping it on your platform to grow your ecosystem, to grow Game Pass and to grow Xbox Cloud Gaming. But you don't want to take the legacy stuff off because you're still making a ton of money off of that. At the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line and the amount of money that they're making and the return on investment. So here, last week, Microsoft put its money where its mouth is and unveiled the 10-year deal. We know about that. Sony and PlayStation did not respond to multiple requests for comments. And we have this quote here. It says, "It's the size of the deal that invites a lot of scrutiny, and rightly so," said Carol Severin, senior games analyst at Media Research. "It's correct that we have this process, but the data and everything else that's coming to light and the data that I'm seeing do not make me think there's any major reason to stop this deal." So that's another analyst who thinks that it is going to pass or that it shouldn't be stopped. They talk about the CMA, how they've talked about cloud gaming in terms of how that is something that they're seriously focusing on, because cloud gaming, I mean, let's be honest, Microsoft has Azure, it's true, but they don't use Azure, from what we understand from what they said, for Xbox Cloud Gaming. Now they just have a bunch of Series X's in a server stack, but it is differentiated from Azure. So right now, when they say that Azure is their big thing, it's not being used to power Xbox Cloud Gaming. It estimates that Microsoft's share of cloud gaming rose from 20 to 30% in 2021 to 60 to 70% in 2022. It warned Microsoft would find it beneficial to make Activision titles exclusive to its own cloud gaming service, xCloud, or on better terms than on rival services. So there's that, but they made the deal with NVIDIA, GeForce Now, put their first party games, their Xbox games, into that service. So you would assume when the deal goes through, Call of Duty comes to Xbox Cloud Gaming, xCloud, it is going to be on NVIDIA GeForce Now. So they are going to be putting it on rival services. And maybe, just maybe, they make a deal to put this on PlayStation Now on the cloud base, because PlayStation Now Premium does have cloud. I think it's only for PS3, but maybe they're like, you know what, if you can get this onto your cloud in PlayStation Plus Premium, we'll give you Call of Duty on your cloud-based service. And I don't see, like, the thing with that is, again, as Phil Spencer has said, to Microsoft, to Xbox, yeah, they want to grow Game Pass, yeah, they want to grow cloud gaming, but their biggest thing is growing their mobile sector right now, because they can see that obviously that is a sector that they haven't tapped into nearly enough. And there's so much potential there for them to be able to grow the business that way, more so probably than the entire Xbox Cloud Gaming right now. So maybe that's something they think of. Maybe that's something to do. I don't know. Spencer feels sympathy for regulators. Okay, so he's being Mr. Nice Guy Phil Spencer again. "Most of the time in my career at Xbox, as I've met with government regulators, there's been a real lack of knowledge about the games industry." Okay, maybe he's being a little maybe not fully nice, because that's true. I mean, we read just through some of these things, and even people like me, or just a random guy at home with a microphone talking about this, seems like from the stuff that you read that these regulators really don't understand the gaming industry whatsoever. He says, I've appreciated spending time with them and in certain cases helping to educate. I think for a lot of regulators, this is the first time they've looked at this industry. And that's concerning. If you're a gamer and you're thinking about regulators in your country, thinking about the government, for a industry that you love as a gamer, and they're having to make these huge decisions that affect all of us, but they have never looked at the gaming industry before. They don't know anything about it. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a concerning thing on the gamer side. One area where Microsoft hopes the deal can increase competition is in mobile app stores, which are dominated by Google and Apple. So we talked about this, like they want to make that a mobile app store. And he says here, we definitely get support from regulators when we talk about opening up mobile and being a credible third-party alternative to those devices. And we're a long way from there today. They are a long way from there today, but Activision Blizzard, I think, will help accelerate that, which I think would be great. To break up Apple and Google as the only two main ones. You have a third one in there. It will reduce prices. It will provide more value, create competition, which is what everybody wants to see. And then they talk about the toxic culture at Activision, which we know all about, and how the unions are supporting this deal. I made an entire video on that. If you want to go check that out on my channel, lots of unions supporting this deal. Obviously, because at Activision, it was a terrible workplace, and they're coming over to a company that has been given praise for the workplace. And there's obviously bad things that happen at Microsoft. There's obviously bad things that happen to any big corporation, but it's far better than Activision Blizzard. And Microsoft has said that they won't try to break up unions. They will allow the employees to gather and talk about unions and form unions and stuff like that. And they will support the unions that have been formed before coming over. And finally, Spencer said, in the due diligence phase, Microsoft scrutinized Activision's plans to clean up its culture. And he says, we believe in the efforts that they've put in place and will continue to put in place to ensure employees feel safe and included where they can best do their work. But if the deal doesn't get approved, what if the deal doesn't get approved? This is an important acquisition for us. It's not some linchpin to the long term. Xbox will exist if this deal doesn't go through. So don't worry, Xbox will be here if this deal doesn't happen. And I think it'll be cool to see whatever happens. For me, I've said this before, the biggest thing with this deal is just Game Pass and how that's going to get all of these games on Game Pass. Activision has an insane back catalog of games. And Phil Spencer has previously talked about wanting to tap into their older games, which I'm more excited about personally than Call of Duty. Although I enjoy Call of Duty, I like to see all the older stuff like the Tony Hawks, the Crashes, the Spyros, all that type of stuff would be cool to see onto Game Pass. But what is going to happen if it doesn't go through? I think that'll be a very interesting saga to follow and see what type of deals Microsoft does do, because they're going to take that cash and they're going to do something with it. They obviously aren't just going to not spend any more money. They're going to do something with that money. But I'm going to leave that there, guys. Let me know what you think about all this stuff. And let me know what you're looking forward to most in the upcoming weeks. And do you think it's going to go through? Do you think it's going to get blocked? But I appreciate you guys all for watching. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you like daily news, like daily gaming news, and obviously right now this is the thing that I'm covering a lot of. So if you like that type of stuff, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.